Hey Hunters, HaloZoo here for a very special video. This is going to be a bit different to what I might normally do, as I'm kind of doing a special one. So this is not 5.5 or 1 D&D. This is my ideas for a Dungeons and Dragons 6th edition. So this is my idea. If Wizards used this, I would like to be paid for this and hired as like an official worker. Uh, but joking aside, this is purely my idea. Some things they might take up, others I don't know. But this is like my idea for starting fresh, totally new edition, not bogged down by the mechanics of any previous edition. This is what I want to see. So, uh, let's begin. But first, before we get into the nitty gritty of what I'm going to do for a 6th edition, let's go back and look at the good and bad of previous systems, at least in my opinion. So they may end up going in different directions because of what they have, but this is what I want for me and what I think the old systems, because we can't really go forward without first analyzing the past and looking back and kind of seeing, okay, what worked and what didn't. Go from there, we can build the next system. So, 4th edition D&D is the first one we're going to look at. We're going to look at 4th edition, 5th edition, and Pathfinder 2e, as those are kind of the three big systems to look at in terms of what we should take and leave from current systems. So 4th edition, the pros: characters are way more customizable while still be easy to play. So kind of a better balance between customization and ease of play. Combat is way more dynamic with excellent tactical options at all times. So basically, you always have stuff to do on any class. You're never pigeonholed into doing one thing over and over and over again. And that's largely in part due to the at-will system, which really helps make characters play much nicer in combats, and it gives a better floor for balancing. Weapons are excellent overall, plenty of variety without overdoing it. So, you've got a bit of complexity that is welcome. So you've got, and you've also got the exotic weapons slash superior, which are just, they are more powerful than martial or simple, but that's the idea. And it gives something that, hey, if you want to be even better, well, here's some more powerful weapons. And they are straight up more powerful. Casters and non-casters are finally balanced and start out fine. Two things that you'd be surprised are just, duh. So, and this was the first system that introduced the idea of casters not sucking at low levels, and introducing the idea of, hey, let's buff starting HP to not be ridiculous, where you add your score instead. Ingenious. Now, granted, that might have gone a bit too far with HP, where it's maybe a bit too high, but overall, it works. Feats are well done overall. They exist, they are part of the system by default, but they give more small buffs that can help round out your character and what they're capable of doing, adding a bit of flavor without being like do or die choices or getting in the way of other stuff. Lots of terminology that helps smooth out how things work with good conditions. So, I'll talk more about it later, but basically the terminology in 4e, perfect. Like, there's a lot of stuff to learn, but it's all relatively simple to learn. Like, learning the types of forced movement is very simple. Push is always away from you, pull always towards you, while a slide is any direction. Okay, that's simple enough to learn. And you've got various conditions that are simple, and a new player can easily pick these conditions up without too much difficulty. And the defense system is awesome. So basically, the players always roll the outcome of their spells and stuff. Awesome. It makes you feel like, oh, you're doing this. Which saving throws, like forcing saves, doesn't really do. So I like the idea that I roll to determine how good my spell is. And the idea that multiple stats affect it, awesome. Makes your characters way more versatile, and makes it where your stats, you don't need certain stats just to survive, like other systems have, where there's only one stat that affects a save, and yeah, that is more powerful by default now. Great. So this ingenious idea there. The cons. Every class plays roughly the same with only slight variation between them. So basically, they balanced casters and non-casters by making there being pretty much no difference at all. The difference is if you use weapons or implements, and it's still not a big change, because you're still using at-wills, encounters, and daily powers. So, yeah. Pretty much went nuclear on that. And not exactly a good thing, in my opinion. So that's one of the really big things of, you fixed it at a high cost. RP abilities are practically non-existent. Almost everything's for combat. Yeah, as good as combat is, they basically stripped away the RP stuff for purely combat, and very much took a very strong approach with the idea that you don't need a lot of rules for the RP stuff. And the RP stuff works better with fewer rules rather than try and stack a bunch of rules for how it works and overcomplicating it and actually restricting what players can do, and instead saying, okay, you can be more creative, but they went too far with it. And there's few core class features outside of essential subclasses, which are usually bad. Or at the very least, they are worse to play than the originals. Like, the worst examples being the Slayer Fighter and Sentinel Druid, though Sentinel Druid's more for the fact that it doesn't fit in 4E, but it does have everything. It just kind of sucks because of something I'll mention in a moment. Add level scaling is here in half form. I hate add level scaling in any form, just because I feel like it's so lazy and stupid. It's one of those things I just don't like at all. Because it feels like it just... Sure, you get bonuses every level, but it just bloats the progression to heck, and it's... Ugh. It's just ick. And classes are given preset roles that pigeonholes you into said role. So basically, if your class is designated as a healer, you're a healer. Period. Sure, you might have different ways of filling that role, but you're still either a leader, a defender, a striker, or a controller. That's what you are. Of course, there's some that kind of blur the lines a bit, and then Sentinel, who has really no defined role and kind of sucks at everything. But at the very least, it's good for solo characters, but other than that, I wouldn't touch it. Because, like, technically, you're a leader, but you have very few things that help you be a leader. It's just stupid. But yeah, those are the... And this is not all the pros and cons. Like, I could gush more about 4th edition and what it does. Like, I haven't even mentioned skill challenges, which are awesome. Just a great idea of, hey, here's a fun way of doing RP encounters. Great. I love it. And then cons, like, I could get into specific classes and stuff, but it's not worth going down that rabbit hole. Uh, 5th edition D&D. So the pros I've listed here, core classes are fleshed out better overall, even if it leaves some things to desire in certain cases, like monk, fighter, for me at least. And it's sort of like, at the very least, the core classes have a lot more going on than the other systems, and it's really what 5e does well. Subclass system offers a unique and impactful choice that alters your course throughout, so, and that's supposed to be throughout the game. But basically, your subclass is part of your character, and it's not just one choice that, oh, you just get this, that's it. No, it keeps going throughout the game, giving you more and more as you progress. It's not as big as your core class, and the impact varies class to class, which, yeah, poor bards. Poor bards. But the idea of the subclass system, great. I do genuinely like the idea of what subclasses do, but anyone who knows me knows there's a big caveat to their subclass design that we'll mention in the cons. Pros. Another pro here is spellcasters finally play well overall with flexible cantrips and flexible spell slots compared to the Vancian Garbo of the past. For reference, Vancian casting is the idea that you prepare spells in certain slots, and when you cast a spell, you forget it for the day. I absolutely hate Vancian casting. 4th edition, getting rid of it was great. Here, it stays gone. Awesome. Spellcasters finally play well. Sure, the balance, that's a different thing, but the basic gameplay, overall better than ever here. It can be better, but it's a great start, for certain. And the backgrounds are excellently designed. 4th edition, they were kind of an afterthought and just a little thing thrown in. Here, they're there from the start, and they're really good overall. I know some people may not like them as much, but I do like the idea that they went for fewer, broader options that give you a decent array of stuff you can be without going too crazy with it. And the backgrounds are more of a flavor thing, which is what they should be. And there's no major benefits. Sure, you might be able to get more skills that synergize with your class if you choose certain backgrounds, but if you don't choose one like that, you're fine. You're just losing out on skills and tools, as well as extra languages known, potentially. So, they don't have a big impact on your mechanical aspect, but can offer a lot of stuff on the thematic aspect that can help flesh out your character and give you stuff tied to what your backstory is, without overbearing itself if you're trying to get the most out of your character. And, we'll get to that. Cons. Feats are now optional and replaceability score increases. I hate this. And it's basically like, feats are just a mess in the system, because they were made optional, and it's, ugh. It feels like they're an afterthought, and no, it's just awful to try and pick between feats and ASI. It's like, it's a choice I don't want to make, and I hate having to do it every time. And I hate the fact that, like, other players in the same game will be like, what, you didn't take your ASI at 4th level for a feat? I hate that it's a choice between those two. It's horrendous, never should have been a thing. It's awful. Many things are way too oversimplified to the point it makes it harder to explain certain rule terminology. A good example of that is forced movement, as it now takes more to explain the exact same thing that was very simply explained in 4th edition, where it's like, you say push, pull, or slide X feet, and boom, that's it. Now it's like, oh, you gotta do all this stuff to, it's like push X feet away from you, or pull X feet towards you. It's like, you're using more words for it. And there's also other stuff like the brackets W weapon terminology wasn't used, so it's like you can't easily explain weapon damage, which is a big loss, and the conditions are infinitely worse. And there's just a lot of stuff where I get you want a simpler to understand game, but 4th edition wasn't hard to understand, and you went even simpler. That was... And it's like, you've gone so far in trying to make it simple, you've actually made stuff harder to understand. Great. And some stuff that isn't used in terminology would probably help fix some stuff that's kind of overpowered, like Colossus Slayer and Toll of the Dead are way more powerful because, like, oh, if it's missing any HP, when you could have had the bloodied term for when an enemy's below half HP and said, oh, when they're bloodied, they get buffed, which would be way more balanced than, oh, are they missing any HP? Okay, time to absolutely destroy the heck out of them. It's just dumb sometimes. Casters and non-casters, once again, have awful balancing as the game progresses, so yeah. Non-casters are once again just better at low levels than casters, and casters still scale into the ridiculous later on. So yeah. At the very least, casters don't suck to play at low levels, which is a very welcome thing, but there is a balance issue as you progress. And then, 1st level is absolutely horrendous again, and you don't get subclasses until 3rd. Ugh. And for reference, I hate subclasses at 3rd level. It's something I despise to no end. Especially because it's like, in several cases, it feels like you don't have a core part of what your character is. Like, with paladins, you don't have your oath, which should be a core thing to being a paladin, and it's gone. You don't have it until 3rd level. Whereas Artificer, like, you're just a generic Artificer. You're not anything special. And with the way they're designed, they designed a class that basically requires its subclass to function, but you have to wait till 3rd to get it? Okay. And with sorcerers, it's like, and warlocks, like, you have to have your subclass at 1st level because it's part of what makes you that class. Your sorceress bloodline is why you're a sorcerer. So there can't really be a generic sorcerer. It doesn't make sense. And with warlock, you make a pact with this patron. That's why you're a warlock. You can't be a warlock without that pact with a patron. But now it's going to 3rd, and you're a warlock without a patron. What? Like, I can get, like, oh, you don't get the abilities till 3rd, but just give it at 1st. And 1st level HP is bad. Just awful. Granted, it's not as bad as it used to be. There used to be D4 hit dice classes. It used to be And yeah, it's bad, but could be worse. And you could also be rolling your starting HP, which, ooh, ew, yeah. Of course, like, that's how I got a starting character with 1 HP, but story for another day. And then combat can get pretty boring on some classes who can only attack turn after turn with no tactical options. So you might have some resources, but at the end of the day, you still just use the same attack time and time and time again. And that's all you can do. So it's very much like, and it's one of those things where I'd say, literally what 5e, like with 4th and 5th, I think that where one system got it right, like 4th edition with combat, 5e with core class progression, and making casters play well, as well as the RP side, it did better. But then what the other did right, it gets wrong. So it's like 5e's combat is worse. 4e's RP side is very much gutted. So yeah. But what about Pathfinder 2e? So this is a newer edition relative to the others. There is one thing I will point out. There was a thing I would mention here, but with the Pathfinder 2e remaster coming, they are getting rid of alignment damage, which is a system I absolutely despised, and I fully think they literally got and came up with the worst way of doing alignment damage you could do without making it actively useless. Where it's like, oh, you might use this. Paizo managed to pull it off, and thank goodness they're changing it to spiritual damage, which is actually functional. Only working on the exact opposite alignment, and then having no neutral damage. Yeah, no, that was stupid, Paizo. You're idiots for making it work like that. I'm sorry. You screwed up. At least you're fixing it. But anyway, what are the good sides of Pathfinder 2e? Feats are here in full force with several types that enable room for deeper customization than before. There are more types than they really needed. Like, they didn't really need to distinguish skill and general feats. Ancestry feats probably shouldn't be a thing, in my opinion. But the idea of having both general and class feats is actually a neat idea, as it allows better customization of your class, which is a cool concept. There is a better balance between casters and non-casters without taking things as far as 4e did and keeping them unique. So the balance is better here, at least with the numbers. So yeah, casters don't get quite as busted later on, and martial characters are able to keep up a lot better than they have in the past. Better mix between active and passive abilities with decent tactical options. So that's actually something I forgot to mention in 4th edition that I should have in hindsight. 4th edition was very much a active ability centric deal, which I guess kind of goes with the core class stuff, where there's not a lot of passives outside the feats. So you don't really get much in the way of passive things, or like triggered abilities. Here, there's a better balance between it. So, and the tactical options are nice here. Not a fan of all of it, like all the skill stuff you can do. Like the skill actions, that's kind of where it starts to stretch a bit. It's cool ideas, but I think it's, if anything, taken to an extreme that I'm not the biggest fan of, personally. But at the very least, you have good tactical options. Intelligence is treated better as a stat. 5th edition really hampered intelligence. Here, it's actually useful. Perhaps a bit too useful, and charisma is pretty bad here. Kind of like Starfinder, actually. Because Starfinder, it was also bad. And, last but not least, for Pathfinder 2e of what I'm mentioning, perception isn't a class, is not a normal skill. It's pretty much on everyone with different scaling. So, some classes progress to have better perception than others, but for the most part, you just have perception. It doesn't take up your skill slots. Thank you, Paizo. It's such an it's the perfect solution to the problem of you always take perception. It's just ingenious. It's perfect. The cons. Way too many options in various areas. Backgrounds in particular being way overbloated. And backgrounds themselves are awful. Like, who the heck thought backgrounds needed ability score increases? Because honestly, I would, and it's one of those things that I'll say, Paizo, and I'll actually say the last point, flavor is added mechanically way too often. With backgrounds, it's like, oh, you have a ability score increase. I don't want my background to matter with my character power. I want to play the character. Like, I don't want to be picking a background because it matches with the stats. That's not what I want. I want to pick a background because I want to pick it. But, no, Pathfinder 2e does the exact opposite and adds a million options. So it's hard to choose from them. And it's just like, I don't want to look through all of this. I'm just going to look for one that buffs my main stat, call it a day. And that's a shame. Also, stuff like, regional weapon types. If there's an equivalent, like, you don't need to have the longsword and katana be separate things. Especially if it's like, they're used in similar ways between the cultures. So, like, your katana is your basic sword in Japan. Just like a longsword is your basic sword in, Europe and stuff. The Jian is the Chinese equivalent. They don't need separate mechanics. Let them be the same thing. It's fine, and actually makes it way better, because it's like, oh, you can be from wherever and still function exactly as you want to. Where it's like, what your character looks like, you can make your character look about it however you want. And in theory, you could look like whatever you want. Granted, there are some things that, you might say is restricted, like, you can't really have, like, you can't look like a minotaur as a human, or you can't, like, have full plate armor if you're a caster. And, like, your longsword has to look like a sword that's, you could wield in one hand. So, like, there might be some restrictions, but you can, like, look like whatever you want without changing your mechanical aspects, which, in my opinion, is way, way better. As if you do it with just flavor, it's oftentimes better to have fewer, broader options that allow for a lot more creativity and imagination rather than adding hard mechanics to everything. On to other stuff, though. Core progression in that of subclasses is absolutely gutted and moved to class feats. So the class feats, great in concept, terrible in execution. So basically the idea is, instead of having a solid core class, and your subclass having a lot of core stuff, it's just an empty shell, with the class feats being the meat of the progression, which really takes away from certain things. Like, look at the Dragon Barbarian versus the Elemental. Without the feats, they kind of come off as very similar, to the point you could play a Dragon Barbarian and flavor it as being elemental based, and vice versa. It, on their own, the mechanics don't really do enough to distinguish that, hey, you're this. And with the Dragon Barbarian, it's like, why the hell do I not get Dragon Breath by default for leveling up this build? And it's like, I have to choose it as a feat? Well, that kills pretty much every other class feat when it comes up. Sure, I could skip it, but I'm a Dragon Barbarian. Why would I skip the most draconic thing I can get with the Dragon Breath? It's my Dragon Breath. The heck? And it's sort of like, okay, stuff you just had before, pretty much gone. Like the no longer aging stuff. Why would I ever pick that over anything else that helps me, both in and out of combat? It's not a balanced system, and it takes a lot of stuff that I would rather just have, and it really hampers the flavor of each, where you're really just a shell of yourself outside the feats, which I don't think should be how it is. I think feats should add flavor, and it's kind of like they should be the sprinkles on top, where they aren't the main part of the recipe. Like, you know, it's not the main, like, core of it. It's not the dough or the icing. It's just adding a little bit of flavor on top. So that's what they should be, and should be little things that add on to your core stuff. Sure, you might have some big things in there, like favorite enemy, for example, should absolutely stay as a feat. And that's another thing. Like, it did favorite enemy right, because it's optional. It's not the default. It's not forced upon you. Amazing. Such a great idea. Of course, it's still Ranger exclusive right now, but it is an idea that maybe each class could have their own versions of it, which is a cool idea. And many 3.5 holdovers remain. True Vancian casting, for one. Thanks, I hate it. If I was playing, like, rules as written Pathfinder 2e, I would be playing a spontaneous caster. Period. But yeah, screw it. And it's also, like, it doesn't really fit in the system well. It's not like, oh, you're the crazy casters of the past, so you gotta have some limit. Instead, it's just like, okay, great. You're gonna punish me for something I can't know ahead of time. It's like, I can't know I'll never need a certain utility spell. So it just encourages you not to play with it. Because, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to use it, so I can't really risk the slot. And it's just a terrible system that should have died a long time ago, and Pathfinder 2e should have left it in the past. Mandatory racial flaws are still around. The heck? Why should I be punished for wanting to make a weird character? It's not fun, people. Get rid of it. Leave it in the past. There was also hardcore alignment restrictions on their paladin equivalent, the champion. Absolutely horrendous system. D&D got rid of it for a reason, because turns out people like playing characters. People like having freedom to be the character they want to be. Like, alignment restrictions for deities, requiring you be in one step of their alignment, that actually makes sense. Why would a deity give power to someone who opposes their ideals? But the champion stuff, no. That should have been left behind. Heightening spells sucks, especially for spontaneous casters. I don't want to relearn a spell I already know and have been using. I have a lot of experience with this. It should not be treated as a totally different spell. And I guess it's kind of a 3.5 holdover, because 3.5 in previous systems, of course, had spells where it was like, oh, you've got your first level, second level, etc. versions of a spell. Here, it's it's the same spell, but it's treated as if it's totally different for spontaneous casters. Thanks, I hate it. I also hate how signature spell is a band-aid mechanic for this, where it's like, oh, instead of being something actually interesting that feels like, yeah, you're better with this spell, instead, it's a band-aid for the fact that, oh, wait, heightening spells kind of sucks, and people aren't heightening their spells at all. Okay, we'll slap a band-aid on it rather than actually fix the problem. Absolutely stupid and insulting. Add level scaling. Thanks, I hate it. And it's worse. It only gets added if you're at least trained. You don't even add half if you're untrained. What the hell are you thinking, Paizo? That is horrendous. Why should I have to take a general feat just to not suck with a skill I'm not trained in? It's just ridiculous. Or, well, I should specify, to actually even be able to use an untrained skill later on. Yeah, I hate add level scaling already. You didn't need to make it worse. And then, of course, flavors added mechanically too often. Already mentioned that. So, now that we've looked at the past and the good and bad, this is the real part. What you've all been waiting for. My vision for 6th edition. So, what are my basic goals here with my design? Take the best of 4th and 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, plus a little of Pathfinder 2e, to make the best possible system. Granted, this is an opinion, but I do think that there's stuff for everyone to like with my idea, and I hope that a broad array of people will enjoy this idea, and it'll be easy to play. Or at least relatively easy to play, especially compared to previous editions of D&D, as well as Pathfinder 1e. Like, anything like 3.5 back, yeah, no, it's a mess. Offer players a vast array of actual choices that are relatively balanced, because it's not going to be totally balanced. That's not happening. But the idea is to get a relative balance with nothing extreme. And specifically, have no major outliers in power, is my minimum. Where it's like, no, you don't have any massive things that are like Eldritch Blast and a Warlock in base 5e, where it's like, yeah, it's so much better than everything else by miles that you might as well not have any other damaging cantrips. Balance approachability and depth, alongside making casters and non-casters feel more balanced without making casters off the play. So basically avoiding the Vancian BS of the past, and kind of keep them, they play like 5th edition, but are more balanced. And specifically more balanced with non-casters. Offer everyone tactical options for both in and out of combat. This is also includes giving players multiple options to potentially use at any time, so you always have choices to make. Sure, you might use a certain option most of the time, but the idea is you'll have other options for specific cases, and you'll always have them available. Offer plenty of ways to customize characters and their builds, balancing having both multiple smaller choices as well as few more impactful choices. So, whereas 4e was a bunch of little choices, as well as Pathfinder 2e, and 5e was more like there's a few big choices, but not much else. Here, I want both. Okay, you've got some small choices, and you got a decent amount, but you also got these few big choices that will have an impact across several levels of the game. And then give players true freedom of choice with no optimize or else choices in sight, even if there may still be best options in raw power. Kind of goes in with the no major outliers in power, but the idea is that you can pick anything you want, and you're never punished for making the wrong choice. There might be a better choice, but it's not like, good, bad, average. Or like, there's no bad choices. There's just kind of like meh choices, and then, okay, this is actually good. So you may have a best option, but you're not going to be too far behind choosing a bad/weird option. Like, if you want to play a halfling barbarian, go ahead. Play a halfling barbarian. And it's not like, oh, you wanted to play a halfling barbarian? Okay, have fun with your strength penalty. Because it's not fun. And that's not player choice. That's not free choice. That's punishing players for making a choice you didn't want them to make. Not a great thing to have. So, what about these tactical choices? To get this done, at-will power is returned from 4th edition on all classes, giving everyone choices of combat abilities at all times. It also helps with balancing, so everyone has at-will powers. Your minimum, output is guaranteed to be, okay, this is what your floor is. That's the same for everyone. Much better foundation to make things balanced, and at-wills were just a lot of fun, because it gave you options no matter the class you were on. And cantrips returned from 5th edition on caster classes, acting as a second set of at-will abilities focused on utility that now don't take away from combat options. So, a problem everything except 4th edition had, in 5th edition as well as Pathfinder 2e, choosing cantrips, you basically had one set of cantrips, and that was both your combat and out-of-combat stuff. So you had to choose both with the same limited pool of resources, which meant some classes got way more choices in cantrips than others, like the 5e Bard, perhaps being the worst by far. Because, for one, you only have one damaging option, or one range damage option, called Vicious Mockery, which means, you're taking that, unless you're going with a weapon build, but even then, it's still a really good cantrip to have. So, you're basically all but guaranteed to have Vicious Mockery, and oh wait, I only have one other cantrip. Great. And if I want more combat versatility, well, that would be instead of having a utility choice. So I'm choosing between Thunderclap for combat in case I need it, or some flavor thing for utility. Here, they're separate things, and the number is different from your at-wills. So, for example, bards will have more cantrips than they have at-will powers, whereas a sorcerer would have more at-wills than cantrips. So, sorcerers are better in combat. They're the powerful mage, but that power comes at the cost of utility, as they're not very refined and have more raw power. Whereas a bard is all about being a utility-based class and kind of a support class. So they have a lot more utility stuff. Spellcasting of 5e returns with a few tweaks, mostly just a balance tuning. So basically, it's roughly the same as 5e. Specifically, there's no difference between spontaneous and prepared in how you cast spells. So no Vancian BS, of course. So you have a number of spells known or prepared, and you can cast them in any combination using your spell slots. So that's the basic idea. Boom. A new system for non-casters is added, exploits. Designed to be similar to spellcasting as a long rest-based resource that allows the character to push the limits of physical abilities to gain an edge in combat. So, this is my solution, which I'm surprised no one else has gone for, because it's like, why wouldn't you add, part of the problem with casters being so good is they're able to do just big things. Like, they're able to cast a fireball and blow up an entire room in a single turn. How do you challenge that without your own ability? And that's where the ingenious thing of 4th edition comes in. Well, what if everyone has that big, limited use, do something epic, and, wipe out rooms of people? Or do one really big strike? That is a lot easier to balance than if, only casters are able to do this. How the heck do we balance non-casters? Yeah, basically making it way more complicated when the answer's surprisingly simple. Of course, it will be different. So, for example, martial exploits would be... The idea is that there's a lot more full actions. And yes, full actions are a thing here. Where you might move and do stuff. Like, a monk might use one that lets them just bounce around and wallop a bunch of people as they dart around. A fighter or a barbarian might charge right in and just do a big swing with their charge attack. A rogue might go into stealth and then snipe someone from afar. And more. So, boom. Everyone gets epic stuff to do on their turn. And the game can be balanced accordingly. And all classes will get at least one short rest-based resource to use, though these will mostly be stuff unique to the class and rarely shared. The one exception being Warlock, as they have pact magic, so that's their short rest ability. They will share it with 2 other classes that are non-core. For anyone who has seen 5.5, yes, it is the Invoker and the Shaman for the Divine and Arcane themes, respectively. Whereas Warlock is Arcane. So, basically, you always have a encounter power, and it's something unique. So, Monk might have their key, Sorcerers will have spells, sorcery points, Wizards will have focus spells. Not exactly the focus spells of Pathfinder 2e, it's just what I'm using for the name. And of course, Fighters will have stuff like Action Surge or such. And basically, it's like you have these things that you'll usually have every fight, but they're still limited uses. And yeah, it's simple but effective and keeps classes unique. Customization. Excuse me. All classes have a primary and secondary subclass, chosen independently of each other. Primary has 8 levels of features, while secondary has 4 levels of features. So your primary subclass is basically your main one. So primary subclasses like your cleric domain, your wizard school, your paladin oath, all that. Secondary subclasses are stuff like fighting style, pact weapon, not pact weapon, pact boon, and stuff like that. So that'll be available to everyone. There is an exception to this rule with the Artificer, but it's not a core class, and It's the one exception to the rule if it's chosen independently, but they're weird. They get to choose 2 from the primary subclass deal, where one is primary and one is secondary. But they're a down the pipeline class for this. And of course, your main class will give you 11 features, or 11 levels of features. Backgrounds return in a form similar to 5e, having skill and tool/language proficiencies, plus optional starting gear. So basically, it's the system of 5e. It's a good one. Keeping it here. It's specifically the one of base 5e, not the one D&D garbo that changed stuff that didn't need to change. Races will also include sub-race options similar to 5e. Specific systems are work in progress, but currently the idea is going to be that, and this ties into ability scores, but each race will have a set ability score increase and then one of 2 options to pick for a second ability score increase. Humans will only get a single option, but it is an increase to any one stat. However, races will also have a racial flaw, but it is optional. If you take the flaw, you get an additional increase in the other stat choice. So basically, let's say for an elf you have dexterity and then wisdom or intelligence, and you can take con as a penalty. Normally, you would only get intelligence or wisdom for your stats increase. But you can take a con penalty to get both an intelligence and a wisdom increase. Currently, the idea is it's going to be just a +1 rather than a +2. So you get 2 +2s and a +1 and a -2 from that. Also, for human, it will be a variable flaw. So you get a flaw in any stat. So you can get a +2 and a +1 in any 2 stats. So it all has to be different stats, of course, but that's the idea I'm running with at the moment. I'll mention it. It's brought up later, but I'm mentioning it here because why not? Feats are similar to 4e in design, but that's like the basic idea of they're relatively smaller things that build on other stuff you have half the time. But similar to Pathfinder 2e, there's 2 types: general and class feats. And you'll have 10 of each by the end. General feats are at every odd level. Class feats are at every even level. You still have normal class features at odd levels. And class feats are basically an additive thing. They're not the core progression here. So you might get various little bonuses to stuff. And also optional stuff that might add on to the character's thematic side. But it's not really a big boost. Like favorite enemies there. Favored terrain might be there. But also stuff like it's an optional upgrade. Like it might upgrade like one of your features that you have. And then armor will be similar to 5e with a couple of tweaks. But weapons will be more like 4e. And it's going to be the same as my D&D Infinite and 5.5 projects, because it's a good weapon system. I like it. So the weapon systems I'm using for those will be in this, but it's my weapon system. I get to, of course I'm going to copy and paste it everywhere. It's a system that works, so no need to fix it. Paragon Paths return from 4th edition as a way to shake up progression at 11th level and up. So you get 4 levels of features to add on to your build at the end. And they will be class specific. So it's basically the prestige classes, but done right, in my opinion. And they're back here as it's just a cool idea of, oh yeah, you're at late levels. Okay, here's a way to shake up your character in the late game. Boom. And multi-classing and hybrid classes will be options. There's no plans for level dipping multi-class like 5e, as of now, at least. But rather than being like, oh, instead of leveling up in your main class, you level up in another. That's not how it works here right now. That could be added, but I don't think I want to, because that's kind of a problematic system. But we'll talk about those two options later. So, the basic gameplay. So, the passive defense system of 4th edition is back, alongside modifying saving throws rules that are interlinked with the passive defenses. Also, for reference, the action system is going to be like 4th edition with full actions returning. So full actions are basically you can either do a full action or take the standard move minor action of 4th edition. And the standard move minor I'm using just because it's a system that's easy to understand. It's another one of those, they way oversimplified things in 5e where calling it just an action is very confusing. And it's just easier to understand the 4th edition terminology, so keeping with that. Defenses are armor class, fortitude, reflex, and willpower. So basically, when a creature targets you directly with an effect, you use your passive defense for it. So it's rolled against your passive. Saving throws include death, fortitude, reflex, and willpower. They're the more proactive defenses, so and it's basically like for lingering effects and traps. So like, someone set down a mine and you make a reflex saving throw to avoid the mine, or you're in a cloud kill and the ticking damage is based on your fortitude. Also, fortitude, reflex, and will, those are the same between the defense and saving throw. So basically you have your bonus to one affects the other. So though it might be something that just affects saving throws, it won't affect the passive, but you get the idea. Armor class and death saves are completely separate from each other, though. So armor class is passive only, death saves are active only. And death saves are also separate, as basically it's a flat d20 roll, plus any saving throw bonuses that specify, or just death save bonuses. You don't get any other bonuses, though. Damage types are split into two categories, physical and energy. Physical damage types are bleed, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. So the ones I'm using for 5.5, basically. And the energy damage types are acid, cold, fire, lightning, necrotic, poison, psychic, radiant, and thunder. Basically, certain things we'll care about if it's physical or energy. That's really the reason there's the two types. It's basically just batching for simplicity in some cases. Resistances and vulnerabilities. They mostly work like 4th edition with a set number that damage type is reduced or increased by. Though, there is resilience and fragility to damage types. And that is actually the 5e resistance and vulnerability. And of course, immunities exist. But basically, the idea is that you do have the basic resistance and vulnerability, but occasionally you might get the resilience or fragility, which is a typically better one. Though, of course, resilience against 2 damage versus resist 5, it's going to do less. But on average, resilience is going to be more brutal, where it's like it always affects it, and the more damage you deal, the better resilience is. And fragility, of course, is just the more damage you deal, the more it gets doubled. Though fragility probably will be much rarer than resilience. And resilience is kind of used as a step in between immunity and resistance. And also will hopefully help fix the poison problem, where various things that have poison immunity would have resilience instead, thus mitigating the flaw of poison damage of, yeah, everything's immune to it, so why would you use it? But that's the basic gameplay stuff. So skills. They're roughly similar to 5e with some renaming and the new society skill. Definitely poached that from Pathfinder 2e because it's a nice addition alongside history and the arcana, religion, nature. So it's there. Uh, could add occultism, or something similar to it for the psionic stuff, but that is up in the air. But I might do it in the end. There's also an alteration to perception and investigation. And speaking of which, there's the new system of intrinsic skills. Basically, you're always proficient in intrinsic skills, and they're associated with a mental stat. Perception is wisdom, investigation is intelligence, and the new bartering is charisma. What is bartering? Basically, it's for buying and selling stuff, and I decided I needed something for charisma besides just the social skills. So I added bartering as a way of letting anyone kind of have a decent shot at buying and selling stuff and using that for trading and all that stuff. So you always have access to bartering with charisma. So it's just a useful adventuring thing of like, hey, I've got these rare treasures, let's barter for it and stuff. So it is a bit iffy, but to be honest, I will admit that it's kind of like, I got no better ideas. That's the best I got, so it's there. Tools return from 5e across multiple categories. There's musical instruments, crafting tools, vehicles, games, and scoundrel tools. Basically, your thieves' tools, disguise kit, etc. Basically anything for basically the rogue tools, but they're not just for rogues. But martial classes will usually have more tools than casters. Well, granted, bards will have the most tools, but they get a lot of musical instruments, so that's why. They use it for casting, so yeah. There's also a new system for skill expertise. And there's also skill mastery, which is just an extension of expertise. Instead of doubling your bonus, it's just a +2 each. Originally thought about +1, but right now I'm tempted to go with a +2. Subject to change, of course, but there's also a unique passive feature to provide a reward for upgrading that skill. Intrinsic skills and tools aren't planned to be part of the system, though I might actually give certain classes expertise and mastery with them. Like, a bard would get bartering expertise and mastery, with the addition of potentially getting perception or investigation expertise and mastery, but like druids and rangers would get perception expertise and mastery. Wizard would get investigation. But and that would kind of be an equivalent to the way that Pathfinder 2e works with them. But yeah, that's the idea. And for what those passives might look like, it'd sort of be like, for athletics, you get a climb and swim speed. And then you may also get, and that would be the expertise, where it's like, oh, you're so good at climbing and swimming that you just have a climb and swim speed equal to half your speed. But then with the mastery, those become equal to your speed and your walking/running speed. And you get a straight up speed increase. So you just move faster because your athletic capabilities have reached their peak and you just move faster. Because I think that's a lot more rewarding than just, oh, you win more with a skill. I still have it there, and that's part of why I had it +1, but I might go back. I'm back and forth between +1 or +2, but you get the idea. It's there. But it's just one of those things where I like the idea that you have a bonus for this skill where, yeah, you get bonuses for it. And for example, with intimidation, it might be, oh yeah, when you're a master with intimidation, you get the ability to ignore immunity to frighten. Like, you're so good at intimidating things, you can intimidate stuff that normally wouldn't be. And that kind of thing where it feels like yeah, you're rewarded for having this deal in a way that's actually there. And sure, it's not just flavor, but it's something that adds on to it mechanically in a positive way rather than just being, oh, it adds more options for the sake of adding more options and all that. So, yeah. Multiclassing. So, multiclassing is back to multiclass feats. Not that I like the system in 4E, but I think that's partly because there's, like, the way the feats are, there's only one type and all that. But here, they take up class feats. And I will also say that I also don't like the archetype feats either in Pathfinder 2e. But yet, here we are with them. But for me, I felt like it actually works a lot better here because the class feats aren't the core of your progression. And there's not a lot of big stuff in there, or at least, like, it's not like, oh, my Dragon Breath is there. Why would I not take Dragon Breath? And having choices of, okay, do I progress my main class or do I dabble in another? And all that. Not great, but here it's like, okay, I can dabble in another class, but, I take my class feats and trade them for, like, dabbling in another class. So, and each one has a few feats to dabble with as much as you want, so there's that. But you can only multi-class with a single class normally, so basically you're limited to choosing one other class to dabble in, but you usually get a few things, and they're usually not as good. But Paragon multi-classing, so you can replace your Paragon path with Paragon multi-classing if you've got it. And it basically lets you further dabble in the second class, and getting stuff that normally wouldn't be available through just multi-classing. So you get a lot more of that second class through Paragon multi-classing. And it's designed as a simple way to mix in elements of another class while staying competent in your main class with very little sacrifice. So there is multi-classing, kind of the simple thing where it's just like, oh, I'm going 15 levels in my main, but I'm taking like 5 levels in another. Just sprinkle some stuff in. And don't worry, stuff like Hexblade won't be a concern here, because classes will work on their own. Hybrid classes, a lot more here, but hybrid classing will replace your primary archetype. So you get the base features of a second class, but you lose the primary archetype. Some features may not be available, but that's the price you pay. Class feats are needed to get primary archetype features from either class. So at the very least, you have options to get stuff for a primary archetype, but you don't have one by default. Or at the very least, you don't get most of the features. You might get a few things on certain classes, like your Warlock Patron you still pick, and you still have the spells, but they're just added to the spell list instead. You don't, like, get them as domain spells or something. But, of course, class feats let you do more with the primary archetypes. You can take at-will powers, cantrips, and class feats from both classes, but you must have an equal or more numbers of class feats in your main class. So, basically, you can't be primarily a barbarian and then take more feats in fighter. No, you're primarily a barbarian. You have to have the same or more barbarian feats to fighter feats. So then there are hybrid feats, which just offer ways to take advantage of your combination or help make a janky combo work. Famous example being barbarians and spellcasters, because normally that absolutely sucks. Here, though, you're given an option to say, hey, you can actually play these. Or just add on to, oh, hey, you have both Wild Shape and Rage. Okay, here's Rage for Wild Shape bonuses. And just kind of going into that where it takes advantage of, hey, you're a weird combo. Let's make it fun. Though some of these may also be available to multi-class, but the idea is that they're mainly for hybrid, or at least designed for hybrid first. At-wills and cantrips are divided amongst your two classes, and the number is based on the average between the two, weighted towards your main class. So a bard sorcerer would get 4 at-wills and 4 cantrips. As for reference, bards get 5 cantrips, 3 at-wills. Sorcerers get 5 at-wills, 3 cantrips. So, boom. And they get 2 per class. While a fighter and warlock would have 5 at-wills and 3 cantrips. And they have to get 3 fighter at-wills, 2 warlock at-wills, and 3 warlock cantrips. As warlocks have 3 cantrips, 4 at-wills, but fighters have 5 at-wills, and of course they're non-casters, so they don't have cantrips. Hit dice are weighted more towards your main class, but will be of the middle size if each class's hit die is 2 or more steps apart. So an example would be a monk and rogue would be a d8, a ranger and druid would use a d10, but a druid ranger would be a d8, a fighter and wizard would use a d8, a barbarian and sorcerer would use a d10, and a sorcerer barbarian would use a d8. So, that's just some examples. Paragon Hybrid allows you to further delve into the second class, granting a more complete combination of the classes with their primary archetypes. So, this lets you get both primary archetypes unlocked, as normally you can only get a primary archetype from one class. Still have a main class, but it's intended to be a way to more fully mix the two classes together compared to multi-class. As of now, I may or may not allow you to multi-class and hybrid at the same time. At the very least, it's going to be you can't multi-class or hybrid with the same class, so you can't take a multi-class feat of either class you have, but you could potentially get 3 classes together through both, but I may or may not allow. I may just make it an optional thing of you might allow it, you might not. Don't know. The ability scores. So the starting scores are generated via point by default. Modifiers progress as they have previously, so it's 12 is plus 1, 12 or 13 plus 1, etc., etc. All that. It's how it's always been. Racial flaws are completely optional, but offer a slight bonus if taken. Humans have variable flaw choice. I already mentioned it. I just had it listed here. But what do the stats do? Well, they each have defensive, skill, and miscellaneous stuff. So strength and con are your fortitude stats. So these offer the fortitude defense and saving throw. Strength, though, it also affects your athletic skill. And it also has your melee weapon attacks, carrying capacity, and initiative. Initiative is no longer ruled by one stat alone. Instead, it is either strength or dexterity. And the idea for giving it to strength is it's tied to athletics, so, an athletic person could probably get acting faster than some others. But it also ended up being, normally it's just your melee attacks and carry capacity, so I felt like initiative would be able to make it more balanced and help things out a bit. And of course, this is just the default. Various things can affect what your melee attack stat is. For example, finesse makes it dexterity. But you might also be Pact of the Blade Warlock, and you use charisma for your weapon attacks. Or you're a Bard of Valor, and they have that. And yes, they get that by default now. You're welcome. Con, meanwhile, doesn't have any skills associated with it. But it affects your hit points, with your con score being added to your starting HP, with the modifier being added to your HP per level. And your hit dice healing is affected by your con modifier. So it's still doing what it does everywhere else. It's just that's it. It's just the HP stuff. Dexterity and intelligence affect both AC and reflex. So this should help out several classes where AC isn't just a dexterity thing anymore. And of course, reflex is for both of them. Dexterity, however, it also does acrobatics, sleight of hand, and stealth. So those are the skills for it. Might change sleight of hand to thievery again, but I'm uncertain. I may or may not. I don't know. But the miscellaneous stuff dexterity does is for ranged weapon attacks and initiative. So thrown weapons are, of course, strength-based by default. But, and then also there's going to be the hefty trait for ranged weapons where it makes them strength-based. Probably not going to be any hefty weapons by default, but the idea is there that some weapons might use your strength to wield, even if they're ranged. And it still does initiative. But hey, it is what it is. Intelligence has the Arcana, History, Nature, Religion, and Society skills, aka the knowledge skills. But it's also used for extra languages. That is returning, because it's just nice to have. It's a cool thing. And investigation. So it is the intrinsic skill for intelligence. So it helps you investigate things. Wisdom and charisma, meanwhile, are the willpower stats. And wisdom is used for animal handling, healing, which is just medicine in 5e. But I call it healing because I just like that term better. Insight and survival. And it is the skill for stat for perception, but it's an intrinsic skill now. Charisma, meanwhile, is used for deception, intimidation, performing, aka performance, and persuasion. And its intrinsic skill is bartering. A part of me wants there to be something for wisdom and charisma beyond the intrinsic skill, but I don't have anything. But I don't know if it's really important, because, like, wisdom's intrinsic skill is straight up the best, and charisma has, like, 3 of the most important basic skills in the game still, where they tend to be the most likely and most impactful when they come up. So I don't think I need it. It's just one of those things that a part of me feels like there should be something else, but oh well. The basic progression. So here it is, people. It's subject to change. Like, I might change the proficiency bonuses to scale by +1 instead of +2. And ironically, it does end up as half-level scaling, but I just don't like the idea that it's a constantly increasing thing. At the very least. I prefer the idea that it's it progresses like 5e, but it could just end up as the 5e proficiency bonus scaling. Ability score increases are at 4th, 8th, 12th, 16th, and 20th. And it is a +1 to 2 stats of your choice, so you don't get the +2s. So you are always increase 2 stats, but if a stat is below 16 and you decide to increase it, it's increased by +2 instead. So kind of similar to what Pathfinder 2e uses, where you increase stats by more if it's low. But, of course, it's still every 4 levels instead of every 5. And it's just 2, but hey, I prefer this, in my opinion. And you'll also notice that you have General feats, of course, at every odd level. So 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th, 13th, 15th, 17th, and 19th general feat. Class feats are, of course, 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th, 10th, 12th, 14th, 16th, 18th, and 20th. And of course, you get your base class stuff at 1st level. Oh, actually, I only did 10 levels of base class stuff. But you get base class stuff at 1st, 3rd, basically every odd level. So every time you get a general feat, you get a base class feature as well. Your primary archetype has a feature at 1st, 3rd, 7th, 9th, then 11th, 13th, 17th, and 20th. So there's also 4 in the first half of the game, 4 in the second half of the game is the idea. And secondary archetype has 2 in the first half, 2 in the second half with the specific abilities at 1st, 5th, 11th, and 15th. So you don't get a pinnacle thing, but they're kind of supposed to be a smaller thing in general anyway. Meanwhile, you get additional at-will powers, which could be removed, but I'm currently keeping them. You get those at 6th, 10th, 14th, and 18th. So you'll get +4 by the end. And the starting count is 3 to 5. And as a side note, you get cantrips whenever you get extra at-wills. Meanwhile, at 11th level, you get your at-will boost. So basically, every at-will deals +1 set of damage. And there you go. But with the Paragon Path, you get that at 11th level. And you get stuff for it at 14th, 17th, and 20th. So you get a pinnacle feature from your Paragon Path and primary archetype at 20th, while the pinnacle feature for your base class is at 19th. So it's impactful all the way, basically. But then there are the skill expertises. Skill expertise appears at, and you'll notice it's only in the first 10 levels, at 2, 2nd, 6th, and then 10th. Which does mean you only get 3 skill expertises by default. However, a class like Rogue, Bard, or Ranger, and Monk also may or may not be getting more expertises and masteries. While the masteries are going to be at 12th, 16th, and 19th. So you've got 3 expertise, 3 mastery, and you will be able to use a mastery to get an expertise instead. So if you wanted 6 skill expertises but didn't want masteries, you're able to do that. So a mastery can count as a skill expertise, but you could also be a master in 3 skills or an expert in 6, is the idea. Now, how do full casters scale? Well, spell ranks go from 1st to 10th, with new ranks unlocked every 2 levels. So instead of saying spell level, it's spell rank. Just a term change that makes a lot of sense for me. It's just easier. Less confusing. And it's certainly better than the first edition, like, oh, we have like 10 different ways to use the term level. Have fun figuring out what they're talking about. And of course, 1st through 5th level spells, you start with 2 when you first get them. 6th through 10th, you get only 1 starting out. And yes, 10th level spells are a thing here. Poached them from Pathfinder 2e just because it just fits so nice. It's just one of those things of, yeah, that it just fits too nicely. So now it's every 2 levels, there's a new level spell slots, and also stuff like Wish is going to be at 10th level. So there's a lot of big spells that are moving to 10th, while some of them are going to stay at 9th. But basically it helps kind of even things out in progression. Also, you get a lot more spells by the end. And of course, for full casters, cantrips will be available as well. And you get more with whenever you get at wills. Not all of them will get an at will boost, so some of them might get a boost. It's possible I end up not giving any a boost, but it's on the table, let's say. And that would be, of course, when you get at will boost, cantrips get boosted too. You get 44 slots in total, with 8 at first level, 8 second, which you literally just get at 20th, 6 third, 6 fourth, 5 fifth, 3 sixth, 3 seventh, 2 eighth, and 2 ninth level slots, which you just get the second one at 20th. You're so awesome, you get to cast 2 ninth level spells per day. And of course, you only have 1 10th level slot, period. That's all you're getting. And of course, clerics and druids, they will actually prepare spells, like they do in 5th edition. And they get to choose to prepare any spell from their list. They don't have a limited one. Sorcerer learn spells. Warlocks will also learn spells, even though they're not full casters. They're still pact mages, but they are considered learned. They're just not listed here. Bards and wizards prepare with a spell book. So, with bards specifically getting like a composition book or like a song book, where it has all their like music and stuff that comprises their spells, or whatever dance moves they use or whatever else. But basically, it's like you have a book that you keep all your spells in as a bard now, and you prepare from that. And as a side note, with learned versus prepared, the spells known, I currently plan to have the spells known for a sorcerer or warlock. It's going to be the number of spell slots you have plus 2 until you get to 6th level, in which it's plus 1, is the current idea. It could just be plus 2 the whole way except 10th, but my current idea is it's spell slots plus 2. Or plus 1 if it's 6th level or higher. And they will usually know more cantrips and... Well, not cantrips, not wills. They're separate, but basically, you know more spells at any given time. And then if you prepare spells, even if you're a bard or wizard, you just prepare a number of spells equal to the spell slots. So if you can prepare, like if you're 5th level, then you would prepare 4 first level spells, 3 second level spells, and 2 third level spells. Whereas a sorcerer would know 6 first level spells, 5 second level spells, and 4 third level spells. Meaning a prepared caster, they can change their list every day, but a learned caster will have more options at any given time, is my idea of balancing the two, where they're distinct, and there's still a sense of versatility versus and there's differences in how they're versatile. So you might have more options as a sorcerer, but a wizard gets to change their spell list entirely each day. And cantrips and at-wills are not prepared normally, except if you are a wizard. So wizards are the only class who prepares cantrips. They're also one of only 2 classes that prepares their at-will powers. But we'll get to what the other one is. Half-casters, of course. Spell ranks go from 1st to 5th, with new ranks every 4 levels. It's the way it is in 5e, basically. Except you start at 1st level now. You don't get cantrips, only at-wills, because you're considered a non-caster, or you're listed with the non-casters. You get 22 spell slots total. And yes, I did kind of fudge the numbers, so you get to be exactly below. You're like exactly half of what a full caster gets. Because I think if you were just half their level, you would only have like, I think it's 21, right? No, it's 19. So you get 3 more spells as a half caster than a full caster would have had. Uh, so you end up at 6 first level spells, 5 second level spells, 4 third level, 4 fourth level, and then 3 fifth level. And of course, the Ranger and Paladin, they're both prepared casters. And then the third half caster, which is going to be the Mistblade, will also be prepared. Mistblade, of course, is returning from 5.5, just because I like the class. It's cool. Why not summon weapons made purely of magic and all that? And martial exploits. I just crazes. Okay, real quickly, the number of exploits is supposed to be different, so for the most part, increase the number by 1 across the board. I'll show this later. But basics, exploits are similar to half casting, except you have more exploits per day. With 26 maximum is the idea. No cantrip equivalent, but you usually have more skills and tools than casters. And this is for the Barbarian, Monk, Fighter, and Rogue. Fighters are the only class that will prepare exploits. And they have a spellbook equivalent called the Manuscript, which is basically just a list of exercises and stuff that they do to ready themselves to use their powers for the day. So you're kind of like the wizard of martial exploits. Whereas Barbarian, Monk, and Rogue, they have to learn their exploits. So you're stuck with them. But that does mean they learn exploits plus 2. Fighters still prepare exactly how many they have. And then also, yes, Fighter is going to be the other class that prepares at-will powers. They also have 5 at-will powers, meaning they have they're one of the 4 classes with the highest number of at-wills known. And they get to prepare them. So you're the master of combat, thus, you are the adaptable one. So you're able to basically swap between what you know every day, and you have a lot more versatility than other martial classes. And that's the idea there. And then, of course, the other classes with 5 at-wills will be the Ranger, as well as the Sorcerer and Druid. Though Druids and Rangers will have some restrictions. So Rangers have to have a melee and a ranged at-will power. Druids have to have a caster form and a beast form power. Similar to 4th edition, basically. And then, of course, as for the classes with 5 cantrips, that's going to be the Bard and the Wizard. And Wizards, of course, get to prepare theirs. Wizards will only have 4 cantrips alongside the Warlock, with the Warlock also having some restrictions to their at-wills known. But it's going to be a bit different where it's like, instead of just, oh, you automatically know Eldritch Blast, you get one from your Pact Boon, which is your secondary archetype, and your primary archetype, aka Patron, will give you a choice of one. But it has to fit the theme. So, like, if you're a Fiend of Hellfire, well, you're going to choose a fire cantrip. If you're a psychic, like Fey one, then you're gonna have a psychic spell, basically. But that's the idea. And then, of course, the Bard and Cleric have only 3 at-wills. But the Cleric and Druid got 4 cantrips, and then the Sorcerer and Warlock have 3. As for non-casters with their at-wills, the other ones, Barbarians and Rogues, have only 3 at-will powers. Mostly because they're like the ones who have kind of like the most specific toolkit. Monk and Paladin have only 4, as I felt like while they would want more versatility, they also don't have the broadest spectrum of stuff they do, like the Fighter and Ranger, so that's where we've ended up. But anyway, on to the final page that I have. Armor and shields. So basically my idea was we're going to keep with the light, medium, heavy armor stuff. And there are set caps for all of them. However, the idea is it's intervals of 3. So light armor, as well as unarmored, have a +6 cap. Medium will cap at +3. Heavy will have no dexterity at all. Shields don't affect it, but they're a bit different. But you'll also note, also I could change this to +9, but I currently do not intend to, because I kind of like the idea that unarmored classes, you're not armored, so you're worse. But all armor scales up to a +9, and there's no like different dex caps for different armors, and it all ends up the same. It's like, no, you have progression. So for light armor, you have padded, simple leather, studded leather, and leather scale. Medium has hide, chain shirt, scaled mail, or scale mail, and breastplates. And then heavy has a chainmail, half plate, splint mail, and full plate. You'll also notice that the armor bonus of the best armor of a previous tier is equivalent to the lowest armor of the next tier. So leather, scale, and hide both have a +3 bonus. A breastplate and chainmail both have a +6 bonus. However, they have different dex caps because they're different armor. So basically, you actually progress through the armor. So like you start with chainmail for heavy armor, and then you go get half plate, you get splint mail, and then you upgrade last but not least to full plate armor for the +9. But basically, it's a way to give some like early game scaling up your armor without using magic armor. And the new tier for light armor was added, just so you actually have 4. There is the possibility I change this to be scaled up by 1, except padded armor, which would stay at +1. So light armor would go to +4, medium to +7, heavy to +10. But currently going to keep it at the +9 max. And of course, this is going to be added to 10. And the cap, of course, it's not just a dex cap, it's dex or int, whichever is higher. Then you'll also notice there is a skill penalty. So padded armor and then medium armor has a -1 penalty. Heavy has a -2 penalty. And heavy armor will impose a -5 foot speed penalty, while heavy armor also needs a scaling strength modifier to use it effectively. So it starts at 13, goes up to 16. So you could actually wear full plate fine by first level, in case you wanted to not increase your strength as much as a paladin or something, but you get the idea. Also note, skill and speed penalties double if you aren't proficient with the armor and lack the minimum strength. So if you don't have the minimum strength, then your penalty's doubled. Or if you're not proficient in armor, well, the penalty's doubled. And you will not be able to cast spells if you're using armor you're not proficient in. And a lot of abilities care about not having armor. I may also add a clause where if you're using light armor, you get a -1 penalty. And you also get a -5 speed penalty if you're using armor you're not proficient in. I may add that in. I might complicate it a bit, but basically you get the idea. If you're not proficient, armor's way worse for you. Also, a penalty will not stack, so you'll know shields have penalties too. They don't stack with armor penalties. You just use the worst of the two. But what about shields? So we have the buckler, the light shield, the heavy shield, and the tower shield. These have separate proficiencies, unlike light, medium, and heavy armor. So there's 7 armor proficiencies, 1 for each armor type, and then the different shield types. So the buckler just adds a +1 bonus to AC, with no reflex bonus, but no skill penalty or speed penalty. The light shield has +1 AC bonus and reflex bonus, but it has a -1 skill penalty. The heavy shield is +2 to AC and reflex, but -2 on skills. And then the powerful tower shield is a +3 to AC and reflex, -3 on skills. So you're gonna have a bad penalty on skills, no matter what. And you have a speed penalty. And note, this is separate to the armor speed penalty. So if you're, say, a dwarf and would get a feature that says, oh, you don't have the heavy armor speed penalty, normally, you still have the tower shield speed penalty. So it's separate to it, and basically if you're using a tower shield, you're going to have -5 speed. But it does let you get a +12 AC. So basically, you can get a 22 AC without magic items. Yeah. It is costly to get to it, but you can get to it. That's the glory of it. And Bard and Rogue will get to the bucklers. Druid and Rangers get to the light shield. Barb and Cleric get to heavy. And then the Fighter and Paladins, they get tower shields. And then, of course, the other 4 classes don't have any shields. Because why would you? Also, as a side note on Monk, the cap will also apply to your Wisdom. However, Dexterity and Wisdom have separate caps. Monks also get the +12 AC. And I'm kind of tempted to keep it just like, yeah, monks casually get the best AC in the game and even get a speed bonus. But you will have the D8 HP. But you're not a glass cannon. Let's put it that way. You have really good AC. And it's actually, you'll have good reflex and willpower. While fortitude will be your lower, but gotta keep something low. But anyway, that has been the look into the 6th edition D&D idea. And let me real quickly go over to martial exploits. I did increase this. So yeah, this is basically you start at 3 for each, and then you'll have 6 first rank exploits, 6 second rank exploits, which you've just gotten the last one, 5 third rank exploits, 5 fourth rank exploits, which you've just got the last one of that, and you have 4 fifth rank exploits. So that's how the exploit system works. There. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. As scuffed as it got at the end, and even though it has been a while. But anyway, I might do some more on this. It's just a side project I have in the back burner, alongside 5.5 and other stuff. And it's more of a thought experiment right now, but I might start fleshing out more and more. But anyway, without further ado, I'll see y'all next time. HaloZoo out.